I wanted to get this short video out to you before the Kickstarter ended. The game is Ortus Regni, and it has to be the single most beautiful game. What's interesting too about this Kickstarter campaign, which is kind of very, very unique, is that the game's already in production, and the Kickstarter, when you back, you're going to get the game, but you're also backing the development of an iOS app. I think it may be Android as well, I'm not sure, but hey, I'm into board games, not computer games. But you've got to back this for the sake of nothing else but its beauty. I definitely want to give you a more detailed description of the gameplay and a walkthrough of how the game plays, but that's something that can't be rushed. I want to be able to relish this game and enjoy showing it to you, but there's very few days left to get your hands on this. It does have a hefty price tag for those outside of the US because it's a weighty game and it's going to cost something to deliver, but when I open this up you're going to see what I love about it. There's been no expense spared on the production quality of this game, in my opinion. Now, you know I'm enthusiastic about this era of history. This game expresses an influence from Anglo-Saxon period, but the artwork is very much medieval. Now, the idea of this game is that it's being played in that high Middle Ages period, post-Norman conquest of 1066, but kind of using an imagined history, as if you were people of those times, using an imagined history, a kind of romanticised version of the Anglo-Saxon period that preceded conquest. So they're imagining a place where we have chivalrous knights, castles, earls. Okay, earls are actually a feature of Anglo-Saxon society. But by the time we get to conquest, Viking invasions was the last, really. Stamford Bridge, Harold Hardrada was the last of the Viking invasions. But this kind of imagines a history where the Vikings are still an ever-present threat. They were post-conquest, but it never realised. In this imagined history, that threat is realised, and we have the notion here of Anglo-Saxon earls looking after their lands, using hired hands to create armies. I mean, this is a time when knights are more than just Anglo-Saxon armed boys. These are the chivalrous mounted knights that we recognise from medieval times. But not only do we have a 2-player base game, we also have a complementary 3- and 4-player expansion to Ortus Regni. So this is a 2, 3, 4 player game with these 2 boxes. Let me crack them up and show you what I'm so impressed about in terms of game quality. From the minute you open the box, you can see there's been no lack of attention to detail. From this wonderful traced image of those medieval peoples playing out that imagined history over the table, to this wonderful high quality rulebook. I mean, look at the imagery and the attention to detail. This textured rulebook is inspired by the medieval illuminated manuscripts that you imagined the monks to be painstakingly poring over. You also have these tapestries, these cloth reference cards to what is the main feature of the game, the cards, because the cards themselves have no text on them. You have to learn, you have to memorize these 15 Earl cards. As you begin the game, you can have these as a reference point, but the game will be quite speedy and will flow really well once you get to know those cards, and you'll be a better player for knowing those cards and knowing them off heart. I mean, the rule book tells us that it can be daunting to make this leap of faith. It also encourages us that we can use these playing cards, make up our own house rules, or invent new games with them if we wish. And as well as the cards, we have a little leatherette bag to hold your components, and some wooden card holders which do echo back to perhaps the Anglo-Saxon artwork that the game is inspired by. So, what are those cards? This is a game of deck construction. There's a whole set of cards available to you, and it will be up to each player to construct their deck. So it's not deck building. You're not going to add to and take away from your deck as you would in a traditional deck builder, but you will construct your deck before you begin play. For there are 90 cards available to each player, but you'll only choose 24 to form your Earl deck. There are 2 Earl decks, one for the blue player and one for the red player. And then the expansion is going to bring us the same again, but for 2 additional players. So take a look. This is given the same quality treatment. So we have the yellow Earl and the green Earl, allowing for 3 and 4 player games as well. These are the Earl cards in their wooden slots. There's 15 Earl cards. There's 6 of each type plus 1 Palace card. There's a larger slot here, so you keep your Palace card. That's going to go into play during setup. But this larger slot here is to hold a pre-built custom deck. Now you've got to select 24 cards. Which 24 you choose is entirely up to you. Both players will have the same set of cards to choose from, and that's where your strategy will be developed, and you'll develop a strategy. I mean, this is a game to be mused over. This is a game to sit down in a comfortable leather chair, 2 brilliant minds musing over the elegance and intricacies of this game. The Palace card here represents the central point of their fiefdom, and the cards which make up their hand, 5 for the start of the game, represent the entourage, princes, vassals, champions, monks, or even hired mercenaries that fill their great hall. This is their hand of cards, their great hall that protect the earldom's frontiers. All the while, there's this non-player force, the Vikings, who from the start of the game are approaching and will eventually invade, for as long as the Earls aren't fighting amongst themselves. These 8 black stones will be the timer that marks their advancing approach, and should they appear causing mayhem and destruction, then a Viking army is drawn. And this bag full of influence cubes will determine which player will control those Viking armies, the red or the blue. On a player's turn, they can be taking actions to expand their fief by using property cards like castles or churches, market towns, land, cathedrals, or you can install a face card as a lord or face down as a protective tower. You can even attack your opponent using cards that you've hired from the army deck, your army reserve, and using a battle deck to determine the outcome of these battles. Or an Earl could use the more subtle attacks of politics. Politics cards like treachery or intrigue. These attacks are more subtle. They aim to destroy or steal opponents' cards. And with one special type of political card, the banner, you can even initiate a joust. And here the joust deck comes into play. Once more, rather than being the joust that we know from medieval times, the influence of the Anglo-Saxons is still there, and the rules tell us that a joust can simply represent a combat of arms to weigh up who is the strongest Earl. Ultimately, the winner of the game is decided by whichever Earl's fiefdom can outlast the other. Once more, I do encourage you to go and check out the Kickstarter with only a few days remaining I look forward to showing you some more when we look at the gameplay of this beautiful card game, Ortus Regni from John Sudbury Games.